Corsair, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Corsair is a super cool product because it's going to help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is going to help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Corsair.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Profasic Code. Stephen Bogran, obviously, because I'm obnoxious.
I thought you were going to keep going with the singing.
It gets tough because, like, you have to think of the words as you go, and that's a real challenge. But
If
obviously,
anybody could do it, I believe in you.
Okay, so great, Jessica. Yes, she's here as well. I don't think I could do it. And then Tyler is here, filling in for Mrs. Castle.
Yes.
She's married, right? It's Mrs. at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think she's married.
She's married.
I know she's married. Gosh.
Yay! Tyler's back though.
Been a while. Happy to be back.
Yeah.
What have you been up to, Tyler? Have you been Smoky Mountaining? Have you Appalachian trailed?
I have not been in the mountains. Well, I did go for a hike with my daughter a couple weekends ago. So I guess I have been somewhat in the mountains.
Are you referring to his beard?
I was going to claim that I was referring to his beard after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, just doing lumberjack things, drinking maple syrup like good Canadian.
Good. I need to get on that.
I'm like outnumbered over here.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little neurotic about my sleep. And we all know in order to feel our best, build muscle, lose body fat, sleep is a big part of it. When I started incorporating cured nightcaps as part of my wind down routine, it truly changed the game in terms of having a good night's quality sleep and waking up feeling refreshed. The thing that makes the nightcap stand out isn't the already properly dosed CBD to help with general aches, discomfort, and mood, but it's the added CBN that takes this product to the next level. CBN supports your body's natural sleep rhythms throughout the night for deep restorative sleep that leaves you feeling ready to take on anything the next day. No grogginess or harsh side effects. I like to take these nightcaps with me when I'm traveling or if I'm experiencing higher stress than normal. Pairing the nightcaps with either Zen or a few drops of one of their CBD oils really hits the spot. Making sure to check out all of Cured's amazing products online. Use the code, all one word, for a discount at checkout.
It's like 2 Canadians to 1.
It's true.
Although, supposedly we were supposed to be French Canadian, like, for my family, but I don't know. I think it was supposed to be my dad's side, because my mom's side was definitely potato farmers in the Idaho. But yeah, apparently the Beaugrand is supposed to be the French Canadian within us and within me. And
I was wondering where your last name came from.
Yes, it does mean beautiful and large.
Does it really?
It does. Beau is beautiful, grand, large, right? And of course, my parents had the wherewithal to make my middle name Richard. So my entire life's a joke. So for those of you who get that, you're welcome. For those of you who don't, it's okay. It's okay too.
Don't go Googling.
Yeah.
Google's your friend.
Yeah.
All right. So what are we supposed to be talking about today? Anyways, all right. Refeeds, diet breaks, cheat meals, explaining the difference, the how, the when, the why, and what they're not supposed to, and the no-no.
And the no-no.
And the no-no. Why am I the way I am? I'm back on my meds, though.
Are you?
Yeah, I just don't feel like they're working as well. Maybe I need to kick up that dosage.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have clients, I think that not it often this doesn't happen, but I will have clients that will, I'll give a refeed day to, or let's say a high day where I do give them macros to hit, and they were like, oh, I had my cheat day. And it's not, and they don't hit their macros. So I'm glad that we're talking about this because it is still a widely used strategy out there. Like it really is, to have a cheat, whatever that is. But why don't we start talking about what these different things are?
Yeah. So I like to define a cheat day as when I go around just screaming up, down, left, right, back, A, B. And I just do that all day. That's my cheat day.
It's for your video game nerds out there.
Right. So I mean, cheat meals, right? Oh God, I don't even know. Tyler, take over. Tyler, take the wheel.
Am I Jesus now? So I mean, for cheap, like I've actually started kind of calling refeed days structured cheat meals just to kind of like blend in the idea, because I think most people like they don't really know what a refeed is. I think it's still kind of a word that's just kind of, not really out there. I think if you're maybe, within our industry, you're a coach, it's a very common word, but people still do see it as like a cheat day, right? Just as kind of like Jess was saying. So like I find like you kind of throw the structured behind the cheat day. You're like, okay, so like I'm still going to give you some extra food, but there's still going to be this overall structure to it. And, I've even started just kind of going, okay, like here's calories. Like don't necessarily maybe worry about the breakdown of your carbs and your fats. I mean, unless maybe you're like a competitor or, really dieting, down to a very lean body fat. But, for just even a lot of lifestyle people, I consider it just like a structured cheat day where it's like, yeah, you know what? Here's an extra 300-ish calories, give or take. Enjoy some food, but I still want you to stay within this structure. So that's kind of where I've started to go. So I know that maybe doesn't quite define what a cheat day is. But I think kind of blending those two has been really helpful in getting people to kind of understand what we want those days to look like. It's not just like an all out free for all, what I think most people would say is a cheat day where, you're just consuming whatever, 7,000 calories and just not even paying attention. So I think that's kind of your basic idea of a cheat day, unless, you guys have other ideas.
Well, like I almost think of that cheat day. So first of all, I don't prescribe to cheat days. I don't like the term. I don't like the thought that goes behind it. I don't like the oh, I'm on this thing, but now I'm going to be off. And it kind of creates this like very black or white thinking behind your nutrition and your health, which I'm not about that. But I don't know. Do you guys remember those like 10,000 calorie challenges that people would,
Hell yeah, brother.
right?
Yeah.
That people would
Michael
put on the
Phelps.
internet. And I watched a few. Okay. Like I definitely watched a few. I watched a good handful back in the day. And like that's what I would say if I was to be a believer in a cheat day or something like that. Like that's what that would be. Because in my mind, first of all, we're not cheating on anything, but it's more like a YOLO. It's like we go all in. I don't care about the macros or the calories or anything like that. And I think that a lot of people can fall into this like hamster wheel effect if they're prescribing to a bit of a cheat. Now it depends. And I think all of these things depend on like a refeed. It depends on, well, are you a competitor? Because that's going to be looking very different if you're in an off season versus a prep. I've had, just like you, Tyler, where I have clients, lifestyle clients in a fat loss phase where I give them a higher calorie day, right? So it is essentially a refeed day, which I think we would say is a day where it's just higher calorie consumption. Sometimes it's macros driven. Sometimes maybe it's calories driven. I've also given clients untracked meals, so free meals. So instead of a cheat meal, it just gives that different connotation. But I've had clients where they just have a calorie goal for that day, but that would not be a competitor in a competition prep.
Well, so I think like this is the difference in like the cheat meals or the cheat days, whichever. So again, I like to frame them as untracked.
Yeah.
because cheat, one, at first and foremost, it now gives a good and bad to like your food and your food choices, right? Okay, cool. I'm good when I'm eating chicken and broccoli and tilapia and asparagus and blah 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 and all the other, the avocados. And I'm bad when I eat French fries or I have a piece of pizza. And it's like, Satan was not a piece of pizza. Satan was not like a taco. You know what I mean? Um, that's not the good and bad idea. So like putting this idea of morality into food, I think is a problem that kind of goes off a different path, and I'll leave that one there. But the other thing is that if it's in the plan, it's not friggin' cheating, right? So that's why I like to call it untracked. The entire point is that we're probably going to have something more calorie dense there. We're probably going to have something that we haven't had in a while, or that doesn't fit into the dieting, calories, macros, food list
Are
to
you talking
be
about on
as
track meals?
beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be one of those things where it's like, yeah, we're doing this untracked meal, i.e. cheat meal, as many people like to call it. But it's still within bounds. It's not an excuse to, as we said this weekend, be an asshole about it, right? So what if when we use an untracked meal, it's much easier to keep it as a lower score on the sphincter scale, whereas the cheat meal is like an excuse to go straight all out. It's an excuse to be a 10. And so even just like that simple semantic of it's a different word, but it's communicating a very different thought process and intent behind it, I think can be important. Because if you are going all out on those things, it's very easy to out eat and outpace whatever kind of good you may have been doing during the week. And that's one of the big things we talk about not doing is getting on that. Okay, I lost some weight and I regained it all over the weekend, and I lost some weight and I regained it all over the weekend, and I lost some weight and I regained it all post diet. Like those are the things we want to keep you away from doing, so that we can spend more time away from dieting, maintaining a healthy weight, like feeling good and doing all the fun things in life.
But when would you use that? When would you use an untracked meal with a client?
So I have some clients that have just pure untracked days. It depends on the person, how they can handle it. If you can't handle it, and we find that every time we do those days, you're way off and overeating and everything's like we're seeing that weight's not maintaining and it's to a detriment, we have to remove that. I find that I haven't found a lot of people that can handle one or multiple untracked days. Probably because a lot of people don't take enough time away from dieting in general. Untracked meals I'll use for most people when they're out of prep, and even some people getting into a diet for a little while to keep things a little bit more feeling like normalcy, right? So it's not this huge change of, okay, cool, I've started the diet, everything's gone forever. Now it's no longer able to, I can't have it anymore. So we still have some of that, but at some point, yeah, when calories start getting low, and especially if it's keeping us from making progress, that's when I'll take that away. I'll drop it and say, hey, this just isn't benefiting us for the goal at hand right now. Yeah.
And like
Doesn't
when
mean,
you say take it away, you're not like punishing the person. Like I want to make it clear to people that like we aren't punishing our clients. It's just that simply it's like not serving you in your goals or in your like even mental health at that time. So it's something that we just remove.
and I think that's like one of those funny things. Like we like to think that the untracked meal, the cheat meal, is this. It's always good for mental health. It's not. It ain't. Like there are some times where that is an outlet for us to utilize poor relationships with food as an outage, or stress management as like an outlet, and to do, a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily be associated with like healthy habit stuff. And that allows us that outlet and kind of almost encourages it to a point. So sometimes the better answer is actually not to have that for some people.
Yeah, it can start that slippery slope.
Yeah. I mean, I talked this weekend about how when like my first year with Steven after my first show, and then we like reverse dieted and we got to a place where my intake was good. And he was like, hey, let's try untracked meals. And I feel like we did it for like a few weeks. And then he was like, okay, we can't handle that. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And at the time I was like, what do you mean? But I like listened to him and I was like, okay. But now, like looking back, I was like, oh yeah, I was totally abusing that. Like I was absolutely abusing it. I was not mentally in a place where I could handle it because I would go and I would just like, I would overeat. I would overeat. I wasn't like eating all day off of my macros, but I intentionally also underate in the like earlier parts of the day so that I could eat more.
Which is also a terrible idea because now
Absolutely.
you're making yourself way hungrier going into a meal that's already going to be more calorie dense, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to save calories for the meal later. And it's like, no, just eat your normal calories so that way when you get to that meal, you're not that much more likely to go way overboard because you haven't eaten all day and now you're extra hungry, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of, and I find that a lot of clients, and I know because I did it, they overthink. Steven's laughing. They overthink an untracked meal. And I'm like, hey, like if you're asking questions about it, we're already overthinking. Like just eat as you normally would and take one or two of those meals that you normally would eat and just have your untracked meal. And that's it. Right? Like that's it. That's all. And if it's a new thing or we're treading lightly into that space, I'll have my clients maybe make a meal with like their family at home, and that's an untracked meal. Or
Yep.
like if we know that certain foods work really well with them, it's like, okay, just go and order a steak and have like a side salad or have like sushi is another one where it's like, okay, just go and have sushi. Where it's a little bit of like a lightly treaded meal. I don't want to use the term like clean or anything like that, but it's not like you're going to the fair and you're like eating a bunch of fair food or anything like that.
I try not to tread on my sushi at all. It completely ruins it.
I know.
And yeah, but it's a good point because literally, like, if you're really worried about starting that, you could start with an untracked meal, doing a meal that you would have done anyways, and just not tracking and weighing what you're putting into it, and just eyeball it and estimate it, and just bloop. There's an untracked meal by definition.
'Cause, I mean, also a lot of times, like if you've been tracking for a long period of time, and if you do something like that, chances are you're just going to be hitting those numbers anyways. And so I think it just mentally starts to kind of take that pressure off from tracking every single little thing all of the time. So just even that skill transferability, for people long term is huge in having those untracked meals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try and transfer my bow staff skills, and it just hasn't happened yet. Hasn't.
I think also like going into it along the lines of like an untracked meal expectation, a lot of times like we'll use it in a off season or what have you, like phase. It's not usually in a fat loss phase or at the beginning of a fat loss phase, but I think a lot of people are also really scared or feeling very anxious about what the scale is going to do the next day. And a, a lot of times the scale might be up because you might be eating more sodium. Like if you're going out to eat at a restaurant, they'll have added more sodium. And so you might have a higher sodium meal. Maybe you're a little bit dehydrated, right? And so, yeah, okay, like the scale, if it does go up, that's okay to some extent. The scale can be a big indicator if you were an asshole like I was. Because if it's going up a lot and then we're maybe not having good digestion for 4 days, like you want to ask yourself, was that really like something that was serving you inappropriate? But I think it's okay that the scale goes up a little bit. Sometimes I've also had clients who will have an untracked meal and the scale goes down because they're not stressed. Like it was an opportunity to chill. And I think like just removing that expectation, like, hey, the expectation is usually from maybe more of like, I don't know, a mental health standpoint, or maybe we're in a growth phase and we actually do want to gain a little bit of weight and like, that's okay. Right. I think people get really focused on the scale and an untracked meal and it's not always necessarily like that's where I'm measuring your success. It could be, but it's also not.
Like it's part of it. Like
Yeah.
the scale can go up, but if the scale goes up 4 or 5 pounds, that's probably a problem. If the scale
Right.
goes up 1 or 2 pounds, that could be normal fluctuation, baby. No biggie.
Well, you could even be tracking and the scale could fluctuate up 1-2 pounds, right? So just even having that
Absolutely.
discussion of like, the untracked meal, tracked, you still could go up no matter what. Like it just may not make any kind of difference whatsoever. So yeah, I think really honing in on the 3-week trends, the 4-week trends, and really getting the client to kind of focus on that can relieve, I think, a lot of that maybe stress that can come with like having that untracked meal and taking that step back. And like I've even, like you were saying, Jess, with like someone's in a growth phase, adding in refeed days during growth phases, I think is fantastic because everyone at a certain point gets to the point where like can't really eat much more food in one day. Like it just becomes too much. And so having maybe those 1 or 2 high days can really kind of top up the stores throughout the week too.
Cool. All right. So I think we've officially done cheat meals pretty good.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was a nice segue into like refeeds.
Yeah. So you guys were talking a little bit about using calories for refeeds and not necessarily worrying about macros. I'm definitely not like I don't utilize that approach. Like for me, I stay on the side of if I'm utilizing a refeed, I am going to prioritize macros. And so typically that's what you would expect for a refeed. And so you could use either of these options. But for me, my goal of a refeed is specifically to increase mostly carbohydrates. Yes, total calories, but carbohydrates being the biggest one, and maybe some fats, depending on how aggressive that refeed might be, to maybe help a little bit with just digestion and making sure that we're not getting too stopped up with that stuff. And so, like, yeah, it could be, all right, we just added 300 calories or 400 calories or however much we want to, depending on the person and where they're at. Or it could be, hey, we're going to maybe drop protein a little bit because sometimes too high a protein can be tough on digestion. And then within that, we're going to make that calorie increase overall with the carbohydrates and or fats, or mixture of the two, sometimes depending. And so it's structured. So whereas the untracked meal, the cheat meal, is a bit more unstructured, and that's the point, is that it's more unstructured. The refeeds, maybe back-to-back refeeds, whatever it might mean, however you do it, it's supposed to be and the intent is to be a more structured approach to help you with, yes, the psychology of it, because sometimes when we're dieting and we're just friggin' hungry, having some days where we get some more food, huge benefit. And that helps keep us able to diet hard on those other days. There's some possible physiology there, which if I get too in depth, I will lose all of you. So we'll just say carbohydrate metabolism can possibly positively impact fat metabolism and probably thyroid health as well. And so having some of those higher days helps us to see those things should hopefully stay in a healthier place, as well as maybe get better sleep, recover better. Just some of those other things that make life nice.
Yeah, the times when I have used calories as a refeed, there's still a protein target, and this is purely like a lifestyle client. I've only actually ever done this twice, where it allowed more flexibility for them and their families, to like go out to eat or something like that during their fat loss phase. So instead of an untracked meal approach, I decided to have it like a little bit more structured, because it was a fat loss phase. So this like that helped with like her mindset and also actually adherence to the plan. So like for me, I was like, okay, cool. Cause we actually tried doing macros, like a refeed day with like higher macros, and it stressed her out. So again, like all of these are all very client dependent, but Steven, I'm with you in terms of like, if I'm going to give someone a refeed day, whether it's in a fat loss phase or like Tyler was saying in a growth phase, and it's a high day, it's usually macros, it's usually higher in carbs. And it depending on the client and depending on the phase, it's usually on their most difficult training day or it's on a fully rest day. And that's super strategic depending on where that client is in whatever phase they are at and what I feel like is needed for them. I don't know. Do you guys do something different? Like where you would give their refeeds? Do you just let them willy-nilly with their refeed?
I think it depends on the client. I think a lot for like lifestyle, they tend to like it on the weekends. That's just, for the most part, that's the hardest part of the week for the majority of people. And so like usually that's when it's dinners out, things like that. And so, that's where I then typically like that, here's your minimum protein, here's carbs and fats, do your best to hit this. But if needed, if you go out for dinner, let's just combine these for now. But yeah, if it's someone who's performance based or a competitor, then I think it does become a little bit more strategic, like you were talking about, Jess, or even having it the day before their hardest training day. So like those carbs are already in the system, ready to
And then
go.
are like, yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I mean, I think partially too, it's experimenting with the client. Like, what does work best for you? Where do you feel your best? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about trying to keep them as consistent as possible and on plan as much as possible. So we may have, the best idea in the world of where it should be, but if it doesn't work well for the client, then it's not really the best idea in the world. So I think it's just having that discussion and really trying to figure out where they're going to get the most benefit out of it.
Yeah. And so I'm in agreement. I pretty much just tell everybody, you can do them whatever the hell days you want and which ones work best for you. But I will often suggest doing them on the weekends. And I think part of that is the reason that people tend to have a harder time on the weekends is you're also not as busy typically on the weekends. You don't have work all week. So you don't have all these other things like taking up that mental space and attention. So now you have more free time to think about being hungry and to focus on food and stuff. So I really do tend to like them on those weekend days or days off even, whether they're training or not, just for that mental benefit of, okay, I know that they're probably not going to be quite as busy with these days off of work, and this should be a benefit. And I will say this, and again, I think it's another contrast between how I like to see refeeds done versus untracked meals, untracked days, whatever it might be. Especially if you're dieting hard, like you're hungry a good amount of the time. My goal for you is not to use your refeed as an excuse to eat ultra processed foods or things that you might not always get otherwise. Because that may not actually benefit you as much in terms of specifically hunger, satiety, staying full. So when people are dieting really hard, my normal advice for how to approach the refeed is just eat more of the foods that you're already eating. Maybe not necessarily just use it all on broccoli or something that's going to bloat you out and wreck you. But like, okay, maybe it's oatmeal. Cool. Let's eat some more oatmeal. Let's eat some more rice. Let's eat some more potato, sweet potato, whatever. Like, let's focus more on those like whole foods that are going to have more fiber content and keep us fuller instead of maybe just saying, cool, let's get the gummy worms, right?
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned that because I would say the same thing. Because digestion on a refeed day is like important, right? So if especially when you're dieting hard and your body might be more susceptible to like just changes and irritations and things like that. And if you're a competitor, you want to have things as reliable as possible. Having more rice, having more oatmeal, but even maybe adding like honey, right? More fruit, have some dried fruit, right? I think coconut water, not that you would have coconut water and like I would not have coconut water if I'm dieting hard. This would be a growth phase situation. I like how I threw that out there and I was like, wait, no, I wouldn't have that.
I take it back. Take it back.
I take it back. Never mind. But yeah, like just having the same kind of general foods that you would normally eat, but just more of it. So I have a question for you guys. Is there a time when you would use one refeed versus 2-day refeeds? Because I've used both.
So I used to be 1-day refeed. So earlier in my career, I would use the single day refeeds, and they would be more aggressive.
Yeah.
And that would be my go-to. Nowadays, I find that I actually prefer the back-to-back refeeds. Refeeds.
Refeeds.
The refeeds are coming out to get me. I've broken the hex law. But I like the back-to-back refeeds. I think being a little bit less aggressive, at least to start, because I feel like it gives you 2 days with a little bit more food, and it's just a little bit easier, I think, for most people to manage that. It feels like a little bit more of a mental break throughout the week instead of just having the one day. And I've had very good results with it. I tend to look at where they're at in the diet relative to their like body weight, calorie intake, carbs, that kind of stuff, to decide when to bring it in and when to utilize it. And then I will also take into account how they're reporting their hunger levels to me. So like if they're saying, "Oh, coach, I'm so hungry right now," and I'm like, "Man, well, your calories aren't really that low, but okay, cool. Maybe we can use a single refeed at that point, and we just need that one day." And at that point, I'll maybe still use a single refeed. But I'd say as I'm getting more aggressive, my preference has been the doubles, the back-to-back days.
Yeah, I think, it's been somewhat similar for me. Like usually, one a day. I mean, for myself, I tend to work with a lot more lifestyle. And so I think, having the one day works the best for the majority of people, just because I think there is a difference between competitors and lifestyle and tracking and things like that. So typically it is the one day, but certainly as someone is, getting a lot leaner and hunger signaling is going up, maybe they need that extra recovery as well for their training session so that we can have like actual good output, then we'll certainly consider that back to back. But just not being super aggressive and trying to keep that weekly average caloric total in mind so that we're still creating that deficit. We don't want to take us out, obviously.
And I think there's one other thing that's good to mention here is that the harder you diet, the harder you're training. So, and you could be like what we consider a Gen Pop person. You could be training your ass off and dieting really hard. It creates more inflammation. It creates more stress. It creates more for you to recover from. And one of the other big intents of a lot of these like dietary interventions of refeeds, cheat meals, diet breaks is to help keep you recovering a little bit better. To maybe help if you have had a lot of really hard workouts and a lot of cardio and glycogen stores might be depleted. So to help like improve sleep, those kind of things. And so again, it's going to be more important for the people that are going really hard and who are really being on the more aggressive end versus the moderate diet. It might not be completely necessary, even though, yes, it absolutely might add a benefit for you. But if you're not lifting crazy hard and you're just kind of going in, hey, you might not need it at all.
Yeah, because I don't usually utilize refeeds until way later in a diet. Unless a client, like the one client that's coming to mind that I used calories and a protein target for her during a fat loss phase, it helped with her adherence and like her mentality in that diet phase. But the fact of the matter is, and I was very clear with her, I was like, once we are starting to kind of see progress drop off, this will be my first thing that I actually remove. And she was cool with that. And we ended up removing it and it was totally fine. It was just, at the beginning of her diet, as we were kind of turning the dial on her fat loss phase. Whereas some clients, usually I wouldn't use a refeed until later when you're much more fatigued. You've been dieting for a while. Yeah, your glycogen stores are depleted and you're just feeling like kind of dead. Maybe not dead. You're just in need of it.
Just, close.
Yes. Close
But,
to death.
And again,
every day.
that doesn't mean you can't use them. That doesn't mean you can't use diet breaks because the Matador study showed really good results with people dieting 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off.
Right.
And it showed that they responded very well to that. So I think, and I guess that leads us into talking about diet breaks next.
Yeah.
But it's important that you can understand that the approach that's right for you might not be right for me, which may need to be different from Jessica's approach and may need to be different from Tyler's approach. We talk about a lot of these things and say, okay, this is probably the average, what we would think we can expect with most people. But, you know, there are always outliers and there's always maybe people that are different. So maybe for you, yeah, you need that extra little break early on in the diet, or you need it at a higher calorie intake. Hey, as long as you're making progress overall, that's the piece de resistance, as we say in French Canada. Is that not true? Did I get it wrong?
No, that's French. French Canadians are different than French, though.
Ah, dang it.
Yeah. Don't want to
Dang
make that comparison. They'll get mad at
That's
you.
right.
Yeah.
Yo, I was in France not too long ago, and I'll be honest, they were wonderful. Everybody was really nice over there.
I
That was
can't speak
cool.
on that, but that's good.
Mm,
Okay,
I
so
can't speak
diet
for each other.
breaks. How long? Okay, first of all, when would we use one?
Diet breaks.
Mhm.
Tyler, he has a beard.
I
let
mean,
him go.
it's kind of context driven. Like it really is. Like I think it really depends on the client and where they're at. I think for myself, if I've got someone dieting, I will drop the suggestion every 4 to 6, 7 weeks. Like it kind of, I get a feel for how maybe the client's doing, how check-ins are coming in, things like that. Like, hey, what if we, considered a small diet break? Sounds like maybe one would be nice, right? Let's take a small step back. Let's eat at maintenance. Let's feel good. And then we can just hop right back into it. So, I know like the Matador study was like the 2 on, 2 off. And I think there's also been kind of the 6 weeks dieting, 1 off. Like, so there is some of those templates out there, but I think the thing that we just need to take away from it, there's no perfect way of doing it. Like it really is just, again, what's going to be best for the client and like what's going to allow them to continue to make that progress. Because I'll tell it, like, I mean, if you've got someone looking to drop 30, 40, 50 pounds, 30, 40 weeks of dieting can be a very long period. So really trying to read about where the client is, making sure they're getting the diet break help that they need to lose that weight. That's where really kind of paying attention to those check-ins come into play.
Also, let me go into scientist mode here. And my poor wife and I think Priscilla will both have to forgive me because they were both, and Dr. Campbell, I'm sorry, because they were all involved in this study. So it was that like 8-week study that looked at diet breaks. And it was like the worst study design to look at diet breaks in a realistic manner that we as coaches use them that I've
They were
ever
in
seen.
it?
I wasn't in it, no.
No,
But
Priscilla and Jillian.
I think Priscilla and Jillian were both in it. So they're both on the abstract with their names on there. And the data says what the data says. So of course, in that context, the diet breaks didn't work. Duh. It's not somebody that's been dieting for a crazy long time. The whole entire study was only 8 weeks, right? So you also have to look at the details of how these studies are run, what populations they're done in, how long these people are dieting, how aggressive they're dieting, are they training along with that? Like what all is happening in terms of just like what's going along with that. Because if you only look at the abstracts, you don't get those sweet, sweet details that let you know that, all right, cool, maybe this wasn't the best study design in terms of actually looking at what we want to look at, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, so a diet, we didn't even touch on what a diet break is, because some people might think that a diet break is like, I don't know, I stopped dieting. Oh my God.
Untracked week, bruh.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
No.
maybe it doesn't go without explanation. Is a diet break is just more like bringing up food, reducing cardio. You're still eating your normal stuff. You're still hitting numbers. You're still on plan. It's not like, hey, y'all, I'm going to Disneyland for 5 days. Bye. Like, I mean, that would be sweet, but like, it would not benefit you. So a diet break is, and it could, like, the length of a diet break also can vary dependent on the client. And I go about a diet break differently for, let's say, if a client is in comp prep versus lifestyle. Like I have a lifestyle client who was in a fat loss phase, and we actually did a planned diet break for while she was traveling for 5 days. So it was kind of like, hey, we're gonna diet, we're gonna make sure we're on plan, blah, blah, blah. And she made excellent progress. And then she went on her trip, and she actually didn't track while she was on her trip. She made sure that she was still active. She prioritized protein, and she actually dropped weight on her trip. And I mean, I don't know, she might have been under eating, but we got back to work and she continued to have progress. So like I've had instances where I have planned diet breaks for more lifestyle clients. Because in a comp prep situation where somebody has been dieting pretty hard for a much longer time and they are a lot leaner, it's sometimes more along the lines of, hey, I see that your body is kind of responding this way, like it's really resistant and maybe having a lot of inflammation, maybe you're sleeping not well, training is going down. I actually just did this with somebody in prep. Hey, for the next 3 days, you're going to eat this food and you're going to do no cardio, like these macros, which were higher macros, and no cardio. And she checked in and she hit a new low. And then I was like, okay, repeat tomorrow. So she's now on like day 5 of higher food, lower cardio, and she continues to drop weight.
I'm mad that you stole that one. And honestly,
I'm so
I was mad
sorry.
at Paul because he kind of stole that one talking about that same thing. Like I give him the sneaky sneak and I trick him. I said, we're just gonna do this for 3 days. I was like, Paul, I've been doing that for years to people, man.
It's
Come
not
on.
a sneaky sneak anymore.
Not sneaky. But like, dude, I love planning diet break. I'll plan diet breaks for people in prep. I don't give a shit. Especially like I have a wedding to go to this week. That's a destination wedding, but I'm still prepping. Okay, cool. Maybe we need to be a little bit more aggressive up front. We plan for that diet break, but at that point, you can't just not track. You still have to at least estimate and do the right things to like be close. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The problem then becomes like if there's always an event you want a diet break for, then you're gonna get not really the progress you want to see. So I mean that's a great excuse and a great reason to use a diet break because we want things to be more realistic for this trip, and we want things to be more doable. And maybe where we're at in the diet just doesn't support that as much. But if we could pop up calories to where we suspect maintenance to be and get some of the cardio down, it doesn't take up so much time. We can do the things we want to do, be the places we want to be, maybe not have to eat Tupperware meals at the wedding, or whatever it is that we're going to do, or enjoy the vacation a little bit more. And now it's more realistic. I think that's great. For me, the other times when I'll specifically want to use a diet break, I want to know how people are feeling. Like if you're beat up, you're not making progress in the gym, and that diet break could go with a training deload too. And it could also be like vice versa. We might just need a training deload. But we're tired all the time. We're fatigued. We are, we have poor mood state. We're really hangry and just bleh, right? So you're not sleeping well. All of those things, your libido is poor. Like it's just not where it normally is. If I hear these things from people, and that's when I'm like, oh yeah, it's time. Because we should have to work hard in a diet for sure. Now, whether you're just trying to get to a new body weight that you haven't been at in a long time, or you're trying to get on stage, still, yeah, it's going to be challenging to some degree. But if we see that everything's suffering from it, and we're having a lot of really bad, like what we call biofeedback, biological feedback, your body's just not doing what it should normally do. It's not quite there. Like that's definitely a sign for me, absolutely, that, hey, we want to take a step back. Want to drop that cardio down. I'll normally, if they're doing a lot of cardio, I might half it. If they're not doing a lot, I might give them some days off. I might take it all away. Again, I might pair that with a deload where they don't do as much in the gym. And I say, hey, I want you to take a set off of everything that you're doing. I want you to take 15% off of everything you're doing. Shoot, I might tell them, I want you to take 2 rest days in a row. Just don't even go to the gym. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to give them more food to go along with that. Because normally what you see is all of a sudden, okay, now they're getting better night's sleep. So getting better night's sleep, everything else is going to be positively impacted, right? Now they might have time to catch up on some of the other things that have been stressing them out because they're just getting behind because there's maybe a lot on our plate for that diet. All right, great. So I like to say planned just because it makes it work for the lifestyle and it makes it more realistic. And then I guess psychological for some people, they're just like tired of dieting and they just need something to freshen it up. And so we can use it for a purely psychological benefit. But really, the one that lets me know it's time for a diet break. This is like, this is it. This is what we need to be doing. Is when I start hearing and seeing all that negative feedback about how you're feeling. And that's why it's so important that, like, if you're coaching with us, don't worry about sounding like you're complaining or bitching, right? However you want to say it. Like, it's not bitching, it's not complaining, it's being honest with us about what's going on for you so that we can make a truly informed decision about what's going to be best for you to accomplish the goal. Because if your hair is falling out, you have no libido, you can't sleep at night, and you're crying yourself in the corner all the time, but you're not telling us, like, hey, maybe we could back off the other stuff to give you some time to deal with the things. But if you don't tell us, how the heck are we supposed to know? We're now actually doing more harm than good because we'd probably be more benefited by just taking this foot off the gas a little bit at that point. You know?
Yeah. I mean, and like, and it can be hard also understanding, like, for a new competitor, what they what feeling of hard is normal in a competition prep, right? Because it's hard. It's like, oh, I've never felt this level of fatigue or, you know, like food focus or these types of things. It's like when you first start training and people are like, oh, oh my God, like I have pain, but it might not be pain. It might just be that their muscles are sore. Right. And so there's like that bit of coaching. Like, I have a few clients who, I have one in prep right now. It's for her very first prep. Like talking her through how, you know, family life might be a little bit harder to deal with because just mood and focus. But then I'm also very clear on, well, you need to communicate with me if this starts to becoming like really hard to handle, because it's going to be hard, but is it unmanageable? How is your focus? How is your mood? How is your libido? Because these things do change, but there is a fine line between, let's say, normal fat loss feels where you're going to be hungry, or like normal comp prep feels where, you know, some things are kind of just feeling a little bit off versus, yeah, your hair is falling out and we're crying in a corner and we feel like we can't go on. And then we're yelling at our partners and those types of things.
I'll be honest, low libido affects my mood. I'm pretty sure every adult.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Tyler has something smart to say. I can feel it. I can feel it in my soul.
Diet breaks are good.
It's like, if you guys shut up.
Yeah, no.
But it's just one of those things. Again, the diet break is controlled. It has structure. It's intentional. It's there for a reason. And I think that's why so often, you know, people are like, oh man, you didn't get this, you didn't get that. And so now it's becoming to the point where, oh, you didn't get a diet break during your dieting phase. Oh, you didn't have refeeds at any point. Like, oh, were you dieting really hard? Like, okay, cool. But we're now getting to the point where, like, oh, that's a red flag. Like, they're like, oh, why wouldn't you have had that? So to be fair, some people might not need them. Some people might hit a really good groove. Some people might get where they want to be on higher calories and less cardio. The world is not fair, right? So some people might have it a little bit easier than others. But generally speaking, especially if you're feeling those, like you have to dig for something, that might be an indicator that, all right, cool, maybe a refeed would be good. Maybe a diet break would be good. Especially depending on how hard you're getting. And I know we talk about like the competition prep versus the general pop. Yo, I see some like people that have no intent to ever step on a bodybuilding stage that are shredded. I'm talking about stage lean. I'm talking about, I bet you if this dude flexes booty cheeks, you're just going to be like, blah, 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 and you're just going to see all them little muscle fibers. So I see people do it in just out in the regular world, just because that's how lean they have to be and they want to see abs or, something else. So there are plenty of people out there that never step on stage. Y'all, I'm sure some of you listening, they're still very, very lean and still push hard ass diets, and still do things that are quite aggressive. So for you guys, I think this stuff is still very reasonable to keep in mind and to consider.
I agree, because I think like we have the transformation challenge going on right now, and there is a guided coaching aspect, but a lot of you can enter the challenge and not go with a coach, and so you can kind of choose your own adventure in in that regard. And sometimes and like I've seen some approaches that are not great, right? And then I mean it's almost like, what happens after the challenge. So it's just, mindful, structured. It's okay to not grind. It's okay to not dig yourself into a hole just for a fat loss phase. It's really okay. If anything, please don't do that, right? Like, you have to work hard. You do have to have some dedication. Things are going to get uncomfortable, could be, also could not be. Like, you might be one of those people that are just like Bob right now is in a freaking fat loss phase and he weighs less than me and he has done no cardio. None. Asshole. But that's cool. Good for him. I love that for him. So you
She
might
doesn't
be
love
like,
it for you, Bob. She's very jealous.
you might be like Bob, or you might just like dig yourself into a hole. And it's like, it's honestly, it's not worth it, because you're going to get into that hole and go, holy hell, how do I get out of this?
Yeah, it's like the harder the diet, the harder the rebound. And so just even having those implemented diet breaks and being okay, not just feeling like you have to completely grind it out, it's gonna make that transition out of the diet that much easier. I mean, there's always gonna be an aspect of it being hard, and like you're still gonna have to act like you are dieting in a sense where it's like things are getting weighed out, like, especially in those initial kind of 6, 8, 10 weeks. But yeah, having those and knowing that you can step back and eat at maintenance calories when you do feel like shit in the middle of a diet, there's some transferability there for sure that's going to help you a lot, because it's like, well, I just lost all this weight, now I rebounded. Well, what was the point of that?
And I do think like that is one of the nice things. So it also, I find that people that get more diet breaks, they get more refeeds, they tend to do better coming out of the diet, because they haven't been so low calories so long that everything's effed. And that's one of the things that maybe doesn't get talked about as often as it should, but is what comes after the diet. And especially for a lot of people that might be listening to us today, your goal maybe not be to just get super shredded and be able to see your butt cheek muscles, right? Your goal might just be, hey, I just want to lose 20, 30 pounds. But what we forget to mention is that we want to keep that off. We don't want that back. And so these can be ways that, yes, okay, maybe it does extend how long you need to be in a diet, quote unquote, dieting phase. But if it helps you to actually keep the weight off, come out of that dieting phase more successfully with weight maintenance, then it's worth it. It's a win. Because otherwise, what happens is what? You put the weight back on, then you have to diet again for maybe harder, maybe an extended amount of time. It's actually taking up so much more of your time that way, by forgetting about the long term, which is I want to get the weight off and keep it off. So how do I do this in a more sustainable manner? And I think these are things that help that to be more sustainable, help you as an individual to be empowered to learn more about how you feel with larger meals, different food sources, those kind of things, at different calorie intakes. Pay attention to how your body's feeling. And that all helps you to maybe not need me or Tyler or Jessica as a coach in the long term, which is our goal. I literally had this conversation with somebody yesterday. They felt bad. They're like, I feel like we've reversed for a bit, and like I'm doing pretty good. I'm hitting my stuff, but I feel like I'm like not tracking as much and doing this. I'm like, that's a good thing. you're maintaining weight, you're still going to the gym, you're not going overboard on food. Like those are good things. You don't need me. That's the goal. You
It's
know?
supposed to be on autopilot at a certain point. Like there doesn't have to be something crazy happening every day, every week. At a certain point, it should just be like that. It's lifestyle. It's part of who I am, and it's just kind of that day to day. Then,
Yeah, those are
don't-
some of my like more not favorite check-ins, but it's like, hey, when there's a check-in and it's like not much to report this week.
Yeah.
That's great. We made progress this week. We weren't trying to like put out fires or deal with any shit. It was just like, hey, we checked our boxes. We did what we needed to do. Fuck yeah. Let's do it again. Right? Like, or now, hey, I know what's actually going on with your body because everything's chill. We can make more informed decisions.
Yes. Yes. Don't get caught up in the hustle culture. You shouldn't have to grind till you die. I know it's the 2020s. That sounds terrible. We've been in here for like 3 years. We're in the fourth, and I'm like, it's the 2020s. What's going on? Snuck up on me. Like at a certain point, the goal should be, whether it's diet breaks, refeeds, untracked meals, that this stuff is, we're living a lifestyle where it's realistic. Because obviously we can't say that we can just do untracked meals and cheat meals all the time and not put on weight and have that be realistic. I don't think that's the case for anybody. But to where our lifestyle matches realistically maintaining weight. Yes, that's going to mean some of our identity is going to have to change. Yes, maybe some of our habits are going to have to change over time, but to where that doesn't take all this mental upkeep and thinking about it all the time. You go into the gym, cool, hour, maybe hour and a half when you go in, work out. That's your stuff to grant. Like, I'm going to build muscle. You go home, you live your life, right? It's normal. That's when you're building muscle and doing your stuff and making progress. It doesn't need to be over the top. It doesn't need to be so exciting. Just needs to be. That's it.
I like
Cool.
that. That was a great wrap up.
just be.
Wrap it up, box.